The first time my son told me I was embarrassing him, he said it in front of the woman who was about to rewrite his life. We were standing in the marble lobby of a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago, and a giant chandelier was glittering above us like it had never known a hard day in its life. People in expensive suits were moving around us with those quiet, polished smiles rich people wear when they think money can smooth every edge in the world. My son, Caleb, stood straight in his tailored navy suit, looking like he belonged there. His future mother-in-law, Diane Bell, stood beside him in a cream-colored dress that looked too perfect to touch. She had one hand resting lightly on the expensive pearl necklace at her throat, and the other holding a champagne flute like she'd been born with it. I had come because Caleb said it was important. He said this dinner was about family unity, whatever that meant. In a room full of people who looked at me like I'd walked in from the wrong side of town. I wore the best dress I owned, a dark green one I'd saved for years to buy, and I'd even gone to the salon to have my hair blown out because I wanted to look like I belonged at my own son's milestone. But the second I opened my mouth to congratulate him, he smiled too tightly and said, "Mom, maybe let me handle the talking tonight." I laughed nervously, because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. When I reached for his arm, he stepped back just enough for everyone to see. Then, still smiling at the crowd, he said, "My mother has always been, well, she's done her best. But tonight is about the Bell family, so let's keep it classy." Classy. That word hit harder than a slap. Diane tilted her head, studying me as if I were a stain on the carpet she couldn't decide whether to ignore or have cleaned. A few people nearby laughed softly, the way people do when they think humiliation is just another form of entertainment. I felt my face burn, but I still stood there holding my purse with both hands, because I had raised Caleb to believe in dignity, even when dignity was the only thing you had left. Then Caleb did something that still wakes me up at night. He leaned in, lowered his voice, and said, "Please don't make this weird. We've got investors here." Investors. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for one terrible second I didn't see the little boy who used to fall asleep on my chest after I worked double shifts and came home too tired to even take off my shoes. I didn't see the teenager who cried when his father walked out and never came back. I didn't see the college freshman I had fed from my own plate when he thought I wouldn't notice he was going hungry. I saw a stranger in an expensive suit, standing under crystal lights, choosing a richer life over the woman who had built the ground beneath it. And then I heard Diane's calm, polished voice behind him. "Caleb," she said, "if there's any confusion about your family situation, we can address it later." Lalter, as if I were an inconvenience to be sorted and filed away. I remember looking at the room, at all those polished faces and perfect teeth and expensive watches, and realizing that if I spoke one more word, they would decide I was beneath the moment. So I swallowed the humiliation and said nothing. But I knew, right then, that something in our family had already broken. What Caleb didn't know was that the life he was now so eager to protect from me had been paid for by my hands, my nights, my sacrifices, and my silence. Every class he took, every meal he ate, every opportunity he stood up there bragging about as if it bloomed out of nowhere, it had all come from me. And when he finally learned the truth, it came too late to save the pride he had built on my back. I raised Caleb alone. His father, Rick, was the kind of man who could charm a room and abandon a family with the same easy smile. He left when Caleb was 6. One morning he was there, complaining about the coffee, and by evening he was gone, taking the good leather chair and the last of the money from our joint account. I remember standing in the kitchen with the bank statement in my hand, reading the number over and over as if it might change if I stared at it long enough. It didn't. After that, it was just me and Caleb in a narrow 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of the city. The building had peeling paint, one elevator that only worked when it felt cooperative, and a heating system that made strange noises all winter long. But Caleb never knew we were poor because I worked hard to hide it. I cleaned office buildings before sunrise. I stocked shelves at a grocery store until my back hurt so badly I had to press my hand against the freezer door just to catch my breath. On weekends, I took care of an elderly woman named Mrs. Alvarez, who paid me cash, and insisted I sit down and eat with her even though I was always too embarrassed to accept. Some nights I slept 4 hours, some nights less. But every month, somehow, I made the rent, I kept the lights on. I kept food in the fridge. I bought Caleb new shoes when his old ones split at the sole. I stayed up until midnight helping him with algebra homework, even when my own hands were raw from scrubbing floors. He was bright from the start. Bright and driven and, yes, a little too aware of what he did not have. I told myself that was good. Hunger can make a person ambitious. I wanted him to want more than I had been able to give. So when he got into Northwestern on a partial scholarship, I cried in the car for 20 minutes before I could drive home. That scholarship was not enough, of course. Not for books, not for transportation, not for the endless extras that college demands from students who aren't supposed to have any gaps in their lives. Caleb didn't talk much about money, but I saw the way he looked at other students' phones, their coats, their weekends, the invisible ease that comes from being raised without fear. He never said thank you for the sacrifices. He didn't need to. I thought the gratitude was in the way he studied late, the way he called every Sunday, the way he promised he would make it all worth it someday. Someday came in the form of an internship at a financial firm downtown, then a job, then an apartment in a nicer part of the city, then the kind of girlfriend who wore expensive perfume and spoke like she'd never had to ask how much something cost. Her name was Vanessa Bell. The first time Caleb brought her home, I was surprised by how carefully she held herself. She wasn't warm, exactly, but she was composed in that way people are when they grew up with money and consider composure a birthright. Her hair was glossy, her nails perfect, and she looked around our apartment with the kind of polite curiosity you'd use in a museum. She smiled at me with well-rehearsed manners and said, "Caleb told me you've worked very hard." I said, "That's a kind way to put it." She laughed lightly, but I noticed her eyes drifting to the old couch, the plain curtains, the stack of bills on the counter I'd forgotten to hide. Caleb stood beside her with a hand in his pocket, watching her reaction like a man watching approval being granted. Later, when she went to the bathroom, I asked him, "Is she serious about you?" He smirked. "Mom, Vanessa is serious about a lot of things." "I don't mean that." "I know what you mean." "Then answer me." He shrugged, but his cheeks tightened. "Her family has connections. Her mother owns 2 investment properties and a stake in a private consulting firm. It's different from what we're used to." Something in the way he said "we're used to" made my chest tighten. I said, "Different doesn't always mean better." Caleb gave me a look I didn't understand at the time. Actually, in my world now, it kind of does. I remember staring at him, waiting for him to laugh or apologize or say he'd been kidding. But he didn't. Instead, he told me he and Vanessa were building something, and that I should try to be supportive because some people understand trajectory and some people don't. That was the first time I felt the cold outline of the son I was losing. When Caleb got engaged, the Bell family hosted a private dinner at a rooftop restaurant that cost more than my monthly rent just to reserve. Diane Bell, Vanessa's mother, was stunning in a way that looked engineered: silver hair, strong cheekbones, perfect posture, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She had the kind of presence that made even rich men seem nervous. She shook Caleb's hand like he was a promising acquisition. Then she looked at me. I stood up, extended my hand, and she gave me the briefest touch of her fingers, as if contact might leave a mark. "So," she said, "you're the mother." The mother, not his mother, just the mother, reduced to a role she didn't consider particularly important. "Yes," I said. "I'm very proud of him." Diane's mouth curved. "That's lovely. We all come from somewhere." I knew then she was one of those women who could insult you while sounding like she was complimenting the weather. Vanessa leaned against Caleb and smiled at her mother's little performance. She was beautiful, polished, and undeniably aware of what her family's money could buy. Caleb looked at her the way starving men look at a feast. They married the following year. I paid for Caleb's wedding suit, a custom one from a place downtown he insisted would photograph well. I also paid for the down payment on his first car after he mentioned needing something presentable for work. He didn't ask directly. He never did. He had learned how to let me volunteer my help, which somehow made it easier for him to feel independent while still using my money. He said things like, "I'll pay you back when the bonus comes in," and "Let me get settled first," and "You know how it is." "Mum, But the money kept flowing from me to him. Tuition balances, he said, were temporary. Closing costs for his condo because the timing was bad. A bridge loan to cover an investment he swore was low risk. A new laptop, dental work, a replacement phone after his old one cracked. A watch when he got promoted because Vanessa said he needed to look the part. I used every bonus from the hospital laundry service where I'd taken a part-time job. I emptied the little savings account I had tried to build for emergencies. I stopped buying myself anything beyond necessities. When my winter coat ripped at the seam, I sewed it back together with thread that didn't match. When my refrigerator died, I waited 3 extra months before replacing it by buying a used one from a neighbor. Caleb never saw any of that. Or maybe he saw it and chose not to. A year after the wedding, Vanessa's mother bought the couple a townhouse in the Gold Coast for convenience. That was the kind of sentence that gets thrown around by people who think convenience should apply to real estate. They moved out of my apartment, and Caleb stopped visiting as often. At first, he blamed work. Then he blamed traffic. Then Vanessa started organizing their weekends. Then there were brunches, events, investment mixers, and charity galas. I was invited to none of them. When I asked him why, Caleb said, "It's not that kind of crowd." I sat in my kitchen holding the phone and asked, "What kind of crowd is your own mother not good enough for?" A pause. Then he said, "Mom, don't do this. You know what I mean." I did know. He meant I made him look small, poor, ordinary. The kind of son who had to be rescued from his own beginning. That hurt more than anything else because I had never once wanted to expose his struggle. I had protected him from shame his entire life. I had lied to neighbors so he wouldn't hear us called broke. I had skipped meals so he could eat. I had sold my wedding ring years ago to cover his college deposit when the scholarship fell short. I had done all of it quietly, because I believed a mother's love was supposed to be invisible. But invisibility, I learned, can turn into erasure if the wrong people decide you're not worth seeing. The trouble started the day Caleb called me in a panic and asked if I could come over immediately. When I arrived at the townhouse, Vanessa opened the door with a strained smile. "He's in the study," she said, almost as if she were referring to a houseguest, not her husband. Caleb was pacing when I entered. Papers were scattered across his desk. His face looked pinched and tired. "Mom," he said, "I need your help." That sentence used to make me proud. This time, it made me wary. What happened? He scrubbed a hand over his face. "There's been a complication with the new investment group." I stared at him. What kind of complication? Vanessa appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "A financial one." That answer made me colder than the air conditioning. Caleb lowered his voice. "I put some money into a property venture. It was supposed to expand our portfolio. The returns were projected. Everything looked solid." I said, And the market shifted." I looked at him. "That is not an answer." He stopped pacing and finally met my eyes. "I need a temporary transfer to cover some obligations." "How much?" He hesitated. $75,000. The room went silent. I actually laughed once because I thought I had misunderstood him. $75,000? It's not as bad as it sounds. No, Caleb. It sounds exactly as bad as it is. Vanessa stepped in then, her expression cool and controlled. "Mrs. Reed, this isn't a crisis if handled properly. We just need liquidity until the property sells." "Liquidity?" I repeated. "You say that like it's a glass of water." She looked at me like I was being difficult on purpose. "It's a standard bridge strategy." I turned to my son. "Have you lost your mind?" He flinched, which surprised me. He was still my boy under the expensive suit and the polished language. Or so I thought. "Mom, please," he said. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't need to. You've asked me for money your whole adult life." His face tightened. "That's unfair." "Is it?" I stepped closer. "How much have I given you, Caleb?" "How much?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. Vanessa cut in. "This is unproductive." "No," I said, my voice sharper now. "What's unproductive is pretending you two are building something when the only thing you've been building is debt on my back." Caleb's jaw hardened. "I said I'd pay it back. You always say that, and I will." "When?" I asked. "After the next crisis? After the next deal? After your next dinner where I'm not classy enough to sit beside you?" His eyes flashed. You don't understand what it takes to move in these circles. I stared at him, stunned by the cruelty of how easily he could say such things. Then Vanessa did something I will never forget. She sighed, folded her arms, and said, Caleb, maybe your mother is just uncomfortable because she's used to small numbers. I turned slowly toward her. She didn't blink, and there it was. The insult wasn't accidental. It was a statement of rank. A woman with money had decided I was beneath her, and my son was standing there letting it happen. I looked at Caleb. Is that what you think too? He didn't answer right away. That silence was its own kind of betrayal. Finally he said, I think you've always had a hard time seeing the bigger picture. The words came out smooth, almost rehearsed. I felt something inside me go still. You're right, I said quietly. I have had a hard time seeing the picture, because all I ever saw was you. Caleb looked away. I'll think about your request, I said. Vanessa gave a tiny nod, as if I had at least learned my place. That night I went home and sat at my kitchen table with every bank statement I could find. I spread them across the wood like evidence in a case I hadn't known I was building. I went line by line through 15 years of support. Tuition, rent, books, bills, car payments, hospital co-pays, furniture, travel costs, emergency transfers, hidden checks, cash withdrawals. I called the bank and requested older records. I dug through tax documents. I found receipts I'd forgotten, canceled checks, promissory notes Caleb had signed in his neat, slanted handwriting and never repaid. By 3 a.m, the truth was no longer blurry. I had paid for almost every major step in Caleb's life. Not all of it directly, maybe, but enough to make the pattern undeniable. Enough to know that without my quiet sacrifice, the image he presented to the world would have collapsed years ago. I should have been angry right then. Instead, I was heartbroken, because the worst part wasn't that he had taken my money. It was that he had let another woman's wealth teach him to be ashamed of the woman who made his life possible. For 3 days, I said nothing. On the 4th day, Caleb sent a text. Mom, did you decide? Need answer soon. No, please. No gratitude. No acknowledgement of what I had already given him. I wrote back, come to my apartment Friday at 7. We need to talk. He replied immediately. Can it wait? Dinner with Vanessa's parents. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then I typed, no. He didn't answer after that. Friday came gray and wet, with rain drumming against the window like impatient fingers. Caleb arrived 20 minutes late, dressed in a charcoal coat with a cashmere scarf that cost more than my groceries for a month. He looked tired and irritated, as though being asked to see me had ruined his evening. He walked in without hugging me. That alone told me everything. I had set the table anyway, not because I expected a meal to fix anything, but because old habits die hard. I poured coffee into the one good cup I owned, the blue one with a chipped rim Caleb used to call his lucky mug when he was small. He glanced around my apartment, then said, this is about the transfer, right? I folded my hands in my lap. No, it's about your life. His brow furrowed. Mom, not now. I'm under pressure. So am I, he sighed. What is this? A lecture? No, a reckoning. That made him laugh once, sharply. You're being dramatic. I reached into the envelope beside me and laid the first bank statement on the table. He didn't pick it up. Then I placed a second one, then a third. Read them, I said. He gave me a suspicious look and finally sat down. As he scanned the pages, I watched his face change. At first confusion, then irritation, then the faint beginning of dread. What are these? Records of every time I helped you. He looked up. Why are you doing this? Because you keep speaking to me like I've contributed nothing. He flipped through the pages faster now, scanning numbers, dates, transfers, old account statements. Mom, what exactly is this supposed to prove? It proves I paid for your college when the scholarship wasn't enough. It proves I covered the gap on your first apartment. It proves I paid your phone bills when you were in med school. I was not in med school. Sorry, your graduate program. It proves I helped with your car, your wedding, your down payment, your emergency loan, your last 3 credit card settlements, and the consulting fee you asked for before you proposed to Vanessa. His head jerked up. You were never supposed to know about that. I looked at him. Of course I knew. I'm your mother. He pushed the papers away like they burned. Why are you bringing this up now? Because you asked me for $75,000 while your wife's family looked at me like I was a stain on a luxury carpet. He rubbed his forehead. You're making this about feelings when it's business. I laughed. And this time the sound came out broken. Business? Caleb, I worked 3 jobs to keep you clothed and fed. I sold my wedding ring to help you through school. I've given you everything I had. That is not business. That is love. He looked down. Say something, I whispered. He exhaled hard. What do you want me to say? That you're sorry. His jaw tightened. Mom, that you know what you did. I did what I had to do to survive. The sentence sliced through me. Survive? I repeated. You think I didn't have to survive? He stood up, pacing. You don't get it. Vanessa's family lives on another level. Opportunities are different. Access is different. They think bigger, and I don't. You've always been practical to the point of limitation. I stared at him. He had actually said it. My son, the boy who once cried because I couldn't afford the exact shoes his friends had, was telling me I was limited. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the coffee cup across the room. I wanted to remind him that my practicality had kept him alive, educated, and employed. But I had spent too many years swallowing anger just to be heard. So instead I asked, did you ever once, even once, think about how I paid for all of it? He looked away. That was answer enough. Then I asked the question I had been terrified to ask. Did Vanessa know? He didn't respond immediately. My stomach sank before the truth even reached me. She knows now, he said. That was worse than a yes. Did you tell her I helped you? He rubbed his face. It came up, I repeated, almost laughing again. What did you say? That your poor mother used to help you before you upgraded? His mouth hardened. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? He said nothing. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. I want you to leave. He looked startled. Mom, leave. Can we at least talk about the loan? I stared at him. There is no loan. His expression darkened. You can't do this to me. I can do whatever I want with my own money. His eyes narrowed. What money? That question, the audacity of it. I felt the room tilt around me. Get out, I said again. He took one step toward me, his voice now colder. You're letting resentment ruin everything. I laughed once in disbelief. Resentment? Caleb? I'm letting reality enter the room. He left without another word. The door shut behind him with a soft, final click that sounded exactly like a lock. For the next week, Caleb did not call me. Vanessa did not call me. Instead, I received a message from a lawyer's office asking me to confirm a time for family financial discussion. Family financial discussion. The phrase was so polished it almost made me laugh. I replied by email and copied the attorney named on the letter. Then I started my own investigation. I hired a retired accountant my friend Mrs. Alvarez recommended, a woman named Gloria who had a no-nonsense haircut and a habit of tapping her glasses on her desk when she found something suspicious. Gloria went through my records, cross-referenced old loans, and built a clean financial timeline. She found every transfer, every withdrawal, every promise. She also found something else. A private banking record showing that Caleb had used my name as a co-signer on 2 lines of credit he had never told me about. I stared at the papers and felt the blood drain from my face. He what? I whispered. Gloria's voice was careful. He signed you in as a support contact with authority on certain accounts. It appears some documents were electronically processed with your information, likely from when he had access to your personal files. My mind raced back to the years when Caleb had helped me organize paperwork and set up online access for my bills. I had trusted him. That trust had become a tool. Gloria looked at me with sympathy that made my throat burn. There's more. I braced myself. She slid another folder across the table. Some of the money you transferred to him was routed into a joint investment account. There was an agreement between him and his wife's mother about temporary capitalization. Based on these documents, it appears the Bell family believed your funds were part of Caleb's personal starting capital. In other words, they may have been aware he relied heavily on you. May have been? She nodded. The wording suggests they knew he had outside support. The question is whether they understood the scale. I sat back, shaking. Not only had Caleb hidden the truth from me, he had hidden it from the woman whose approval he worshipped. Or maybe he had told her just enough to make me sound incidental. A week later, I got my answer. Vanessa called. Her voice was smooth and brittle. We need to discuss some discrepancies. I said, funny. I was just thinking the same thing. She ignored that. My mother believes your financial contributions should be clarified. Why? Because Caleb's business application listed his family background inaccurately. My son lied? There was a pause. Let's not be melodramatic. I smiled despite myself. Even now, even caught in the middle of a mess, she still spoke as if truth were a matter of tone. I said, if you want clarification, come by Friday. She hesitated. Why Friday? Because that's when the whole truth comes out. She arrived with Diane and a lawyer. I was ready. I'd transformed my little apartment into something almost formal. I had set out the records, the bank statements, the loan documents, the old checks, and the accountant's summary in neat stacks across my dining table. I had also invited one more person, the loan officer from the private lender who had started asking questions after a missed payment on an account that had my name attached. He sat quietly in the corner, legal pad on his knee, while the Bell family entered and took in the room with narrowed eyes. Diane's expression shifted immediately when she saw the documents. What is this? A history lesson? I said. Vanessa looked at Caleb, who stood near the door with his face pale and angry. He had clearly hoped to control the conversation. He had not expected me to prepare for war. The lawyer introduced himself and asked, in a tidy voice, what precisely this meeting was about. I said, it's about who paid for Caleb's life. No one spoke. Then I started at the beginning. I talked about the apartment, the overtime, the second jobs, the college forms, the scholarship gap, the loan from the credit union, the emergency transfers, the wedding expenses, the car, the condo, the startup capital, the hidden debt, the disguised support, the money Caleb had never repaid. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply laid every fact out with the calm of someone finally done protecting other people from the truth. Diane's face changed inch by inch. First disbelief, then annoyance, then a dangerous stillness. Caleb finally found his voice. You didn't need to do this here. I turned to him. Where else? You stole my dignity in public. I'm taking it back in front of witnesses. His cheeks flushed. That's not fair, I snapped. You want to talk about fair? He went silent. Vanessa's lawyer cleared his throat and examined the papers. These documents appear authentic. Diane stared at the highlighted totals. This cannot be right. It is right, Gloria said from where she sat near the window. I verified it. Diane's eyes flicked toward me. You are telling me this woman paid for your son's rise? I didn't answer. Caleb did. No, he said quickly. It was a combination of things. I turned to him slowly. Say that again. He looked trapped. You meant to lie. His jaw tightened. Diane's voice sharpened. Caleb, why was this not disclosed to us? He looked at Vanessa, then at her mother. Because it's complicated. That's not an answer, Diane said. His voice rose. I didn't want to be reduced to that life again. There it was. The shame. The thing he had been hiding all along. I felt the room go still. You were ashamed of me, I said. He opened his mouth, but I kept going. You were ashamed of the apartment. Ashamed of the second-hand furniture. Ashamed of your mother cleaning offices so you could wear a suit like that. So you let them think your success bloomed out of nowhere. Caleb's face had gone hard again. I built this life. I almost smiled because the lie was so pure now, it was almost beautiful in its ugliness. You built it? I asked. Caleb, I paid your way when the bank said no. When your internship didn't cover rent. When your business plan was nothing but confidence and borrowed money. You used my savings like it was air. He shot back. And I paid you back in pride. The words hit the room like glass breaking. Vanessa gasped softly. Diane's eyes widened. Even the lawyer looked shocked. I took one step closer. Pride? Yes, he said. though his voice had started to shake now. "I made something of myself. That should matter. You think I didn't want that for you? You think I wanted my son to struggle forever? I think you wanted to keep me dependent." That accusation was so unfair, so lazy, so cruel that I couldn't speak for a second. When I did, my voice was low and deadly calm. "I wanted you to have a life. You wanted to be seen by people who would have admired you more if I had vanished." Silence. Then Diane spoke, very softly. "Did you know about the private capital?" Caleb hesitated. That was answer enough again. Her face changed in a way I had not expected. Not sympathy, not kindness, calculation. She turned from him to the lawyer and asked to see the other documents. The lawyer read them. His expression tightened. Vanessa looked pale now. "What is it?" He looked up slowly. "It appears Mr. Reed's financial disclosures to your family were incomplete. Potentially, materially incomplete." Diane set her jaw. "How incomplete?" The lawyer glanced at Caleb. He represented that the funds available to him were primarily self-generated. Diane's eyes narrowed. "And were they?" No one wanted to answer that. So I did. "No," I said. "They were mine." The room became very quiet. And then, unexpectedly, Diane laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because rich people sometimes laugh when the world doesn't stay arranged the way they expected. "So all this time," she said, "you've been carrying him. I mit Hergase." "Yes." She turned to Caleb slowly. "You let my daughter marry a man built on a lie." Vanessa's eyes flashed. "Mother." "No," Diane said. "Do not interrupt me." She looked at Caleb with the first true anger I had ever seen from her. "You let us believe you were self-made." Caleb's face went red. "I am self-made." I almost laughed again. "By whose hands?" He slammed a palm on the table. "Enough." The lawyer stepped forward with professional caution. "Mr. Reed, there are serious concerns here regarding certain loan applications and disclosures. If your financial position was misrepresented, there could be legal consequences." That was when Caleb finally looked afraid. Not embarrassed. Not angry. Afraid. Vanessa turned to him with disbelief written all over her face. "You told me your family had a modest background, but you were stable. You said your mother was supportive, not that she funded half your adult life." He muttered. "It wasn't relevant." "Not relevant," she repeated. "You built our marriage on relevance." Diane moved closer to the table, reading the receipts with visible disgust. "And you asked this woman for $75,000? Caleb's eyes darted to me. "That was temporary," I answered for him. "It always is." The truth had done its work. There was no taking it back now. The Bell family retreated that night, not in a dramatic storm, but in a thin, icy silence that felt far more powerful. Their lawyer left with copies of the documents. The loan officer left with a new understanding of where to direct his questions. Gloria left with a satisfied nod and a promise to keep every paper safe. Caleb stayed behind. I had hoped, foolishly, that he might collapse into honesty once the walls came down. I thought maybe the son I loved was still in there, waiting beneath the arrogance. Instead, he stood in my apartment and said, "You destroyed everything." I stared at him. "You did that yourself." I could lose my marriage. My heart went strangely still. "And you think that is my fault? You should have handled this privately." "Privately?" I repeated. "You humiliated me in public. You let your wife's family treat me like furniture. You asked for money without gratitude, then told me I was limited. And you think I should have handled this privately?" His eyes had gone wet now, but I wasn't moved. He took a breath. "Mom, I was trying to protect my future." "And mine?" I asked. He didn't answer. "So there it is," I said. "You were protecting yourself from the truth that your success had roots. Roots in a woman you were too embarrassed to name." He shook his head. "I never hated you." "No," I said. "You just used me in private and erased me in public." That line broke something in him. I saw it in his face. Maybe not enough to transform him, but enough to crack the armor. He sat down slowly, his hands covering his face. For a moment, the room was quiet except for the rain tapping the window. Then he whispered, almost like a child again. "I thought if they knew how much I depended on you, they'd think I was weak. The confession should have softened me." Instead, it made me sad beyond measure. Caleb, I said gently, every human being depends on somebody. That is not weakness. Lying about it is. He lifted his head, and in his eyes I saw the boy I'd once rocked through fevers and heartbreaks. I wanted to be enough, he said. You already were, I replied. You just didn't know how to stand beside me and let that be true. He looked at the floor. Then the consequences began, one after another. The way real consequences do. Not with fireworks, but with paperwork and phone calls and uncomfortable meetings. The Bell family's lawyer discovered financial misrepresentations in Caleb's loan filings. The investment group reviewed his numbers and froze an account pending further verification. Vanessa, furious and humiliated, moved back into her mother's townhouse. Diane cut off access to family funds while the legal matters were sorted. And when Caleb's employer learned there was a question about disclosure in a private financing matter connected to company reputation, his promotion disappeared almost overnight. He didn't lose everything at once. Real life rarely works that neatly. He lost enough. The townhouse lease was no longer convenient. The business venture collapsed. The new car went back to the lender. The weekend country club memberships vanished. The polished life he had been so desperate to inhabit started cracking at the seams, and because he had built so much of it on borrowed certainty, there was nothing underneath to hold it up. Vanessa filed for separation 6 weeks later, not because she was innocent, because she was practical. She told him, in a voice so calm it was almost cruel, that she had married a man she believed was transparent and self-sufficient, and that she no longer trusted his version of reality. That was the last wound he expected. The worst ones often are. As for Diane, she made one final appearance in my life. She came alone. No pearls, no entourage, no high-gloss smile. Just a woman in a plain black coat standing at my door on an overcast afternoon. I came to apologize, she said. I studied her for a moment before stepping aside. She sat at my kitchen table and folded her hands tightly. I judged you poorly. I didn't say anything. She continued. I thought money proved refinement. I thought hardship made people careless. I was wrong. I looked at her and said, You were cruel to me. Her eyes flicked up. Yes, that honesty surprised me. I have no excuse. No, I said. You don't. She nodded once. Vanessa is my daughter, and I was wrong to encourage her to value image over character. Her voice softened. And your son. He made his choices. I leaned back, waiting. She drew a breath. For what it is worth, I don't think he set out to harm you. I think he became the kind of man who only recognizes value when it arrives dressed the way he wants. That was the most humane thing she had ever said to me. You're not here just to apologize, I said. She gave a faint, tired smile. No. I'm here because your accountant's summary made certain legal issues impossible to ignore. Caleb's prior financial disclosures may require correction. My lawyers advised me to encourage a private settlement before this gets uglier. I almost laughed at the irony. She had come not out of guilt alone, but because the truth threatened her world too. Still, I listened. We worked out an agreement through attorneys over the next month. Caleb signed a repayment arrangement. It was not generous, but it was enforceable. Some of the money he'd taken would come back slowly over years. Some never would. But the point was not the full sum anymore. The point was that his lies no longer belonged to him. I also took action on the accounts that had my name attached without proper consent. The private lender reviewed the records. My credit was repaired. Some of the documents Caleb had hidden were untangled. I was not destroyed. I was, in a way that mattered, restored. Caleb came to see me one more time before the settlement was finalized. He looked thinner then. Not just in body, but in spirit. The expensive polish had worn off. He wore a coat with a small tear at the sleeve, and for the first time in years he looked like the boy who used to wait for the bus in winter with his hands shoved deep in his pockets because we couldn't afford gloves that matched. I know I can't fix this, he said. I was folding laundry at the time and did not look up. I know, I said. He swallowed. I'm sorry. I stopped folding and finally looked at him. I believe you, I said. His eyes filled, but I didn't rush to comfort him. Redemption, I've learned, begins where performance ends. He sat down across from me. Do you hate me? The question was so raw that it almost undid me. No, I said after a long pause. But I don't recognize the version of you that did this. He nodded slowly, as if he deserved that. Then I said the words I had been carrying for weeks. I gave you everything because I loved you. Not because I wanted to own you. Not because I wanted your gratitude. I did it because I believed you would remember where you came from and use that memory to become kind. His face fell. But you let money teach you to be ashamed of love, I said. That is a hard lesson to come back from. He wiped a hand across his face. Can I ever make it right? I looked at him for a long moment. Not all of it, I said. But you can start by telling the truth from now on. To everyone, especially yourself. He nodded. I expected him to leave then. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and set something on the table. It was my old wedding ring. The ring I had sold years ago when he needed help with tuition. I stared at it, speechless. I found out where it went, he said quietly. I bought it back. The tears came then, against my will. Not because the ring mattered more than everything else. It didn't. But because it meant he had finally seen one of the sacrifices I had buried. I'm not promising this fixes anything, he said. I just wanted you to have it back. I picked up the ring with trembling fingers. For a long time, neither of us said anything. When he stood to go, he paused at the door. Mom? Yes? He looked at me with a face stripped bare of arrogance for the first time in years. I really did forget who paid for my life. I nodded once, holding the ring in my palm. I know, I said. That was your mistake. He left quietly. After that, the house felt different. Not empty exactly. Cleaner. Like a storm had passed through and taken the stale air with it. I started sleeping better. I planted flowers in the little patch beside my building because I wanted color in my life that did not depend on anyone else's permission. I joined a community center board that helped single mothers with tuition grants and emergency housing support. I spoke at one fundraiser, and when I stood at the podium, I told the room something I had never said aloud before. People like to call sacrifice noble when it belongs to somebody else, but most of the time, sacrifice is just hard work done quietly by people who love too much to let pride interrupt survival. The room went silent after that. Months later, Caleb showed up to one of those events in a plain suit with no shine to it. He stood at the back, not demanding attention, not trying to impress anyone. Afterward, he waited until everyone else had gone and asked if I'd have coffee with him. We sat in a small diner across from the center, and he told me he had started consulting for a firm that didn't care about family names as much as accountability. He was paying down what he owed. He was renting a smaller apartment. He had started seeing a counselor. His idea, not mine. He said the hardest part was learning how to live without the costume. I told him that was the beginning of wisdom. He gave me a tired smile. Do you think I'll ever be good enough again? I thought about that for a long time before answering. Good enough for who? He looked down at his coffee. For you. My heart twisted in a way I could not explain. You are my son, I said. You don't have to earn that title back, but you do have to earn back trust. He nodded. We are not healed in a perfect way now. Real families do not become fairy tales because someone finally says sorry. There are still awkward pauses. There are still old wounds that ache when the weather changes. Some days I look at him and remember too much. Some days he looks at me and sees more than he knows how to handle. But there is honesty now. There is also distance. And strangely, peace. Vanessa moved on, I hear. Diane sold one of the investment properties and redirected the money into a scholarship fund under her own name. Though whether guilt or image prompted that, I cannot say. I don't spend much time thinking about them anymore. They were a chapter in my life, not the whole story. The whole story was this. I loved a boy so deeply that I built a bridge with my own hands and then watched him cross it pretending no one had laid the boards beneath his feet. He thought wealth made his life. He learned, painfully and publicly, that the real foundation had been sacrifice, patience, and a woman he forgot how to honor. And I learned something too. Love is powerful, but it must not become permission. Not for lies. Not for disrespect. Not for a son to stand in a chandelier-lit room and look at the woman who fed him, clothed him, and carried him through every storm as if she were an embarrassment. Because the truth, in the end, always rises. And when it did not come with revenge for revenge's sake. It came with justice. Caleb lost the polished life he had built on borrowed light. The Bell family lost the illusion that money could protect them from consequence. Vanessa lost the man she thought she knew. And I lost the illusion that being a good mother would guarantee gratitude. What I gained was harder. I gained my voice. I gained my name back. I gained the ring that had once funded his future and now rested again in my hand. No longer a sacrifice I had to explain to anyone who didn't deserve the story. Most of all, I gained the peace of knowing that when my son finally looked at the full shape of his life, he could no longer pretend the woman standing behind him had never been there. He knew now. He knew who paid for his education, who kept him fed, who gave him his start, who loved him enough to let him rise before he learned how to stand with integrity. And he knew something even more important. He knew that pride can buy a seat at the rich table, but only truth decides whether you deserve to stay there. I did not ruin my son. He ruined the lie. And in the end, that was the only thing that needed to fall.